So we're going to bring out Jen, who is a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. So come on up on the stage, Jen. And she's got the coolest pants on right now.
The TikTok dance. Awesome. So I have no confidence whatsoever in this slide thingamajig, so I've got my iPhone here, so we'll see what happens. Okay. Great. Well, we've had some incredible talks, right? Can we give a round of applause for the amazing talks? Amazing. So I found so much to resonate with about the orchestra. I'm a violinist, so I was sitting in my first chair, and it's like you look over your shoulder and like, oh my gosh, they're going to kill me. They're out to get me. Small pond, large fish. And the talk that Yuri gave about asking that question. So the TLDR of my talk is basically, it took me 20 years to ask the question, but eventually I asked the question. So this is kind of the long road towards what I call finding the fulcrum. What's a fulcrum? Anybody know what a fulcrum is? Yeah, so when you have a lever or a seesaw, it's this little bit where the lever is able to take on load, and you would change the lever to allow for more load to be lifted. So it's this pivot point in a lever. And this is a really interesting motif that's used in engineering. It's used in all different contexts. I'm a literary nerd, so I'm a literature person. So for me, I always think about how can we talk about this sort of thing in a literary context. So let's talk about these pivot points, starting in a literary context and ending up on a personal note, in a personal context, and with regards to us in our careers as software engineers. Okay, you ready? So we're gonna dive deep. Okay, it's 103, ladies. Sonnet 103. I want you to listen to this sonnet. It's a good one. And tell me where the pivot point lies in this sonnet. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I've seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I on her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare as any she belied with false compare. Where's the fulcrum? Did you catch it? It's the last two lines. In a Shakespearean sonnet, the fulcrum, the pivot point, the torna, is those last two lines. And it looks like this. So this is where the whole sense of the poem is turned on its head, right? So he's making fun of what we call the blason. So this is the parts where he's talking about how the beauty of the mistress is like this, and he's totally making fun of it by the last two lines. So we can see that he's turning the convention on its head, which is what Shakespeare tends to do. Read all his sonnets with very great care, because he doesn't mean anything he says. It's also called the volta. So in a Petrarchian sonnet, you're going to get... Don't worry, we're going to get past it. So Petrarch is really great. He really actually does mean what he says. So let's find the pivot right in this poem. Those eyes, 'neath which my passionate rapture rose, the arms, hands, feet, the beauty that erewhile could my own soul from its own self beguile, and in a separate world of dreams enclose, the hair's bright tresses full of golden glows, and the soft lightning of the angelic smile that changed this earth to some celestial isle are now but dust, poor dust that nothing knows. And yet I live, myself I grieve and scorn, left dark without the light I loved in vain, adrift in tempest on a bark forlorn. Dead is the source of all my amorous strain, dry is the channel of my thoughts outworn, and my sad harp can sound but notes of pain. This is actually kind of moving. Where's the pivot? It's between 8 and 6. So after the 8th line, whenever you see a sentence like, and yet I live, this is where that moment happens when everything is turned on its head, where you do a pivot, and you're like, what's going on here? This is something new and different. So let's talk about, it's right here. So let's talk about how it is to be a humanist in tech. Here you are. And let's talk about the pivot points that you can find to maybe bring in some of the interest in the humanities, in your hobbies, and your interests, and inform your work in tech with those interests. So I have a really weird background. I have a PhD in Old French literature. I'm from Cal Berkeley. I was a Fulbright scholar in France. I worked in the manuscripts room for a year, waiting to get number 95 of this big-ass manuscript. I studied at the École pratique des études, the École des études en sciences sociales, Sorbonne 3 and 4, I interned at the Bibliothèque de Nationale. My job was vacuuming manuscripts. It was awesome. It was really fun. And I took classes at the MFA. It just goes on and on and on and on. It's 10 years. Turns out, laugh riot, it's really hard to get a job in the US teaching Old French literature. Nobody told me. Long story short, 20 years later, I'm a software engineer. I have been a software engineer for 20 years. I just joined Microsoft about a year ago, and I've been a developer advocate for about 6 years. So, you know, this is my personal pivot point, you know, when you had to completely retrain from zero and start from scratch and work your way back up. But what I've always tried to do in my career is to find ways that all of this work, these years in grad school, can somehow be used in tech, in my interest in tech, somehow bring my interests together to find that pivot point, to find the fulcrum. So this is kind of the story that I want to talk about. And it's like that Ross Perot, is it Ross Perot? It's the meme where he's saying, it's happened, you know, it's happening. Because now I'm a team lead, I'm on the academic team at Microsoft. What is the academic team? We're the cool kids. So, so I'm in the cloud advocacy department. We have about 100 cloud advocates. It's huge. There's a lot of really famous people in this department, and we organize ourselves by audiences. So there's the pro dev people, there's the academic people, there's the open source people. On the academic team, we take care of teachers and students. So if you're a teacher or a student and you're interested in using anything having to do with Microsoft, if there's any way we can help you create curriculum, that's what we do. So, and it didn't happen organically. I was hired at Microsoft to manage the regional team. So I was supposed to manage Canada, US, and Latin America cloud advocates. That whole thing kind of crumbled and fell into the dust. And I had to make a decision, you know, what I was going to do. So what I do on the academic team in particular is I'm running a pilot to create partnerships with museums and libraries. And this is my fulcrum. This is my pivot point. This is where I've literally found my happy place. So it's really been a great ride. Some of the projects in our pipeline are really fun. We're working with MIT Museum to do an exposition on AI art. We're working with Rome 3 University on what they call the In Codice Ratio project. It's to take Latin manuscripts in the Vatican secret archives and find ways to use machine learning to transcribe them. You can't use OCR, you have to use something more image focused. So they're doing incredible work. I'm helping them bring that stuff into the vernacular, so it's getting very, very close to my PhD work. So it makes me really happy. We're working with a researcher who is a specialist in Mayan glyphs. He's an art historian in pre-Columbian art. We're working on making a database and a website for them. Working with Landmark Trust in the UK. These are people who restore old buildings. So we're working with the HoloLens team to figure out if you can go into one of these old buildings and kind of visualize what they used to look like. So spatial computing has a big play in museums and libraries at Microsoft. We have a lot of really cool projects. And I get a little bit excited about this sort of thing. But finally, after 20 years of being in tech, as a developer advocate, I finally found that fulcrum of my personal interest, and then this technology. So it's this idea that you can balance the tech that you're doing with your humanistic studies eventually, sooner rather than later, hopefully. Hopefully it won't take you 20 years. And I wanted to give you some ideas of how I did this. You're going to see these commonalities in these talks by listening, by watching, by asking the question. When we dismantled the regional team, our department head called me when I was speaking in Stockholm, and he's like, Jen, what do you want to do? I was like, oh, well. I want the academic team. I want to join the academic team. And I want to run a pilot on museums and libraries because that is just what I want to do. And finally, you know, you have these opportunities because you're at a big enough company that has this kind of play. You position yourself strategically and you can make it happen. So this has been just a huge pleasure. And what's happened is that it's turned out that working in museums and libraries is actually very intersectional. So one of the big rocks that we have to do on the academic team is work with faculty. Well, we can do that by working in a museum. There's a lot of faculty who are working in museums. It's really interesting. Another thing we have to do is give product feedback. So if somebody is using our products, we're supposed to give feedback to our product teams. That's one of our jobs as developer advocates. So we can do that by creating something for a museum and seeing how it works, seeing how the pricing works or doesn't work, and then give feedback back to the product team. We call these lighthouse wins. And I think it allows you basically to think outside the box and really enjoy what you're doing. You can reach new communities that you never would have reached before. And then you can kind of flex your tech muscles. You can set yourself some interesting tech challenges by working with data sets that have nothing to do with the usual stuff that you see in tutorials. I'm working on lace-making data sets that I'm creating from my personal collection of lace. Working with patterns. We're going to have a GAN, a generative adversarial neural network, to create new lace patterns. This kind of stuff is really, really interesting. Are you a lace maker? Uh-oh. I know, right? Fam. Yeah. And just making interesting tools that people can put their own data sets in and make interesting machine learning models against it. It's fantastic. And then we can create reusable sample code. So we might create something for a museum or a library that could be used in a curriculum somewhere else, or that some product team could use. So it's all intersectional. It all kind of works towards the big rock goals of the department. Oh, this didn't turn out. It was a squirrel going like this. Yeah. So this is me every day. So it's really, 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 really fun. And so that's me, the blank square. Yes. Oh, well. So my question to you is, what's your passion? What gets you up every day? Hopefully it won't take you 20 years to figure out that if you ask that right question, that you can bring your passion and find the fulcrum where your tech is informing your passion and your passion is informing your tech. So this is really, this is kind of the message. How can tech inform the richness of your life, and how can the richness of your life inform the technologies that you're building? Find your fulcrum, just like we just heard in the last talk. Great. And tell me about it. Tell me about what you're building. Maybe I can help. Maybe we can partner. Maybe there's a museum and library out there that I can get my hot little hands into and make some fun data sets. You can find me online on Twitter at Jen Looper. I made a little AKA MS link for you with my social links. But I didn't mention that I also am the founder of Vue Vixens, and our next initiative is Front-End Foxes. So if you're a front-end developer and you're interested in Vue.js and React, you might want to come and join us. These are initiatives for people who identify as women, and we have a lot of really fun activities and meetups. It's an international organization. There's a lot of us all over the world. So it's super, super fun and very integral. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.